Everyone has been claiming 2023 as being one of the best years for gaming since 2007, and whilst that can be true thanks to a slew of successful titles, I honestly can't agree with that statement, as this year has seen a multitude of layoffs throughout the industry and studio shutdowns. Some of these shutdowns were the results of the people running them being completely out of touch with what their audiences wanted, and others were the results of CEOs firing half their employees just because a few extra people didn't want to buy their shitty microtransactions. The studio we are discussing today did both. Bungie. We all know Bungie thanks to their wondrous works on the Marathon and Halo series, with the latter sending the studio to superstardom thanks to revolutionizing FPS games on the console market. If you know how Bungie operated, they were always full of ambition, wanting to push the boundaries and make the best game possible. Not only were they ambitious, but there was always this feeling of community within the studio, where, in a sense, the studio operated like a family, always willing to hear each other's ideas and working in perfect harmony. That same feeling can also be applied to how they interacted with their player base during the Halo days. This level of care and investment is why many of us and those who work in the industry respected Bungie and held them in such high regard. They cared more about making a great game first, rather than what can make them more money the quickest way. But good times have to end eventually. After completing their work on their final Halo game and departing from Microsoft, in 2014, Bungie released their biggest game yet, Destiny, an MMO titled with a shared world with a focus on loot, stats and character building in a similar vein to World of Warcraft. Many people, including me, were ready to jump into another world from the creators of one of the best games of all time. Sadly, Destiny did not meet expectations. The game's content was lacking, with an over-reliance on repetitive gameplay, frustrating loot system, and a completely hollow storyline with awful, cryptic dialogue that confused many of us, considering their previous works in Halo were considered as some of the best sci-fi stories around.
Fuck this guy! Seriously! Fuck you, Cryptarch!
You are nothing.
You're a piece of shit!
This level of disappointment from Destiny caused many to wonder what exactly happened to the game, resulting in many in-depth reviews of the game and commentaries that revealed that Destiny went through major revisions before its final release, with many prime Bungie employees leaving the studio prior to the game's release. Most noticeably, the game's creative writer Joseph Staten left over a year before the game actually released. And next was Martin O'Donnell, Halo's respected composer who also created Destiny's soundtrack alongside Michael Salvatore. His departure would result in a legal battle between Bungie and Activision regarding the use of his music, with Marty becoming the victor. All of these were the signs that something wasn't right with Bungie. And boy, if only we knew sooner of the storm that was eventually going to hit. Cut to today, after a long list of DLCs, a sequel, Bungie departing from Activision, Destiny going free to play and being bought out by Sony in 2022, Bungie today has caused a significant controversy as a large number of employees, including some that have been present at the studio for almost 25 years, have sadly been laid off as a result of a 45% drop in revenue meant to be generated from Destiny's microtransactions and DLC. Because of how microtransactions are heavily involved in Destiny gameplay systems, making the game bordering on impossible to enjoy. Many of Destiny's players have left the game, thus this is why the drop in revenue exists. The heartbreaking part is that none of this is the fault of the developers. They aren't the people who make these decisions, it's management and the CEOs. It got so bad, developers went to the management and begged to make the necessary changes to win back the players that would have resulted in players to return. In response to this, Bungie's management and CEOs laid off 100+ employees of several departments within the studio. Two of these were sadly Michael Salvatore and Lorraine McLeese, the lady who designed Halo's iconic logo. This is downright disgusting behaviour. Developers should not be punished and losing their jobs, especially nearing Christmas when bonuses are nearby. Because players aren't investing in the shitty systems the higher-ups implemented to squeeze as much money from the players as possible. Because of how heavily implemented the monetization is to the core of the game, Destiny is no longer a fun experience, therefore diminishing the very thing Bungie used to go by, creating fun games first instead of finding the easiest and quickest way to earn cash. It's even worse when the management came out in a failed attempt to soften the blow of these layoffs. Maybe if you found a good balance instead of driving people away because of your shit systems, you wouldn't have to lay off people from their jobs. At this point, the Bungie we all knew and grew up with is well and truly dead, and it was all because of greed and zero regard for employees and players' enjoyment from the higher-ups. This whole ordeal should be a lesson to games and companies that have monetization systems. The more you push for nasty schemes such as microtransactions that negatively impact people's enjoyment because they are baked into the core systems of the games they play, like Destiny 2, people will become tired of the nonsense, leaving the game, and thus the revenue will cease to circulate. I understand these forms of monetizations are needed in a free-to-play environment, but that is an excuse that I refuse to hear. This also extends to £70 games as well. There are many great examples of games that have released, whether that be single player, multiplayer, or both, that have been majorly successful because the games were so greatly designed and respected their fan bases. From the get-go, people flocked to go out and make a purchase. Nickel and diming, or outright forcing people to pay for items that are completely worthless in the grand scheme of things and only inhibit people's fun, leads to failure. It's why games like Halo Infinite became financially unsuccessful, because the higher-ups went too far, and people who defend these systems by using particular tactics such as "it's my money" or "who cares" as a counter are part of the problem, because they enable the exact type of people that ruin Destiny and Bungie's reputation and the lives of its employees. Listen very carefully. The more people buy into these dreadful schemes, the more that games will continue to be no longer fun, and thus less fun games will be available on the market. If it happened with Destiny, and to some extent Halo, it will eventually bleed into many of the franchises that you and I love, even some where you wouldn't expect these systems to be. Just something to think about before you make a purchase of these microtransactions.